Most debt advice is written for people who made bad decisions with money. That is not who you are. You are a man who built something real, who managed real money, who made strategic decisions that made sense at the time, and then watched forces outside of your control take everything away. The debt you're carrying right now is not the result of carelessness. It is the aftermath of a collapse, and the strategy for dealing with it is completely different from what the textbooks say. This video is about that strategy, the real one, the one that actually works for men in a rebuild. So let's get into it. After the 2008 real estate market collapsed, I spent 2 years trying to hold on before I finally filed bankruptcy in 2010. 2 years of draining $50,000 in savings. 2 years of juggling 6 mortgages on properties worth $40,000 each that I had paid $120,000 for. 2 years of making calls, negotiating, trying every option available before I finally had to let go. What I learned during those 2 years, and what I wish someone had told me at the beginning, is that debt in the aftermath of a collapse is a completely different animal than the debt advice industry is built to address. Standard debt advice assumes you overspent, that you bought things you couldn't afford, that the solution is discipline and a budget and a payment plan. But that's not what happened to you, and it's not what happened to me. The debt I carried wasn't the result of carelessness. It was the wreckage of a financial collapse driven by forces I couldn't predict or control. Interest rate hikes, a global pandemic, a real estate market that fell apart because legislation I had no part in creating caused the problem, and that context matters because it changes how you need to think about debt and how you approach the creditors and what a realistic strategy actually looks like for a man in your situation. After the fix and flip fund collapsed, after losing nearly $500,000 in investor capital to 10 interest rate hikes in 10 months, I had a different kind of debt. Not just financial institutions, real people who had trusted me with their money. That weight is different, and it required a completely different kind of strategy and courage to address. Here's what I learned across all 3 collapses about what actually works. Step 1, separate the debt clearly into 3 categories. Not all debt in a rebuild is the same, and treating it all the same is one of the most expensive mistakes a man can make in the early stages of recovery. Category 1 is survival, threatening debt. This is debt where non-payment directly threatens your floor, your housing, your transportation to income, your basic stability. Mortgage or rent arrears, a car lien on a vehicle you need to generate income. This debt gets prioritized above everything else because losing it means losing the foundation of the rebuild. Category 2 is high-cost consumer debt. Credit cards, personal loans, high-interest rate obligations. These are costing you the most in interest, but do not threaten your floor in the same immediate way. They get addressed after the floor is protected. And category 3 is legacy debt. Obligations from the collapse itself. Business debts, investor obligations, deficiency balances, tax liabilities. This category requires a different approach because of the amounts are usually often much larger and the options are often more negotiable than most men realize. Sort every debt into one of these 3 categories before you make a single payment decision. The category determines the strategy, not the amount, but the category. Step 2, negotiate before you pay. This is the step most men skip because it feels uncomfortable. It requires admitting to someone else exactly where they stand. But creditors negotiate constantly. It is built into their business model. Reduce interest rates, extended terms, temporary forbearance, lump sum settlements for a fraction of the balance. All of these are available before an account goes to collections. After collections, the options narrow significantly. After 2010, the calls I made to creditors before I stopped paying, The ones where I was honest about what had happened almost always produced better outcomes than the obligations I avoided until they became collections situations. So call first and be honest. Ask directly, what options do you have for someone in my situation? You'll be surprised how often the answer is better than you expected. Step 3, use the avalanche on what remains. Once you've sorted and negotiated, you need a system for paying down what remains. The avalanche method, or sometimes called the snowball method, is the most effective for men who understand numbers. Make minimum payments on every debt, then direct every additional dollar at the highest interest rate debt first. When that debt is eliminated, roll that payment into the next highest rate. One system applied consistently every month without exception. This is mathematically the fastest and cheapest way to eliminate debt. It saves you the most money in interest, and for a man who built and managed real financial portfolios, it makes more sense than the alternatives. Step 4, protect your credit score deliberately. After a financial collapse, especially after a bankruptcy, your credit score feels like a public verdict on who you are, a number that announces your failure to every institution that asks. But credit scores are not permanent, they are dynamic. They respond to behavior, and the behavior that rebuilds a damaged score is specific, learnable, and executable starting right now, regardless of where your score currently sits. On-time payments on whatever remains, low credit utilization, no new hard inquiries unless absolutely necessary, a secured credit card used for one small recurring expense and paid in full every month. None of those behaviors require money you don't have. They require discipline and consistency. Within 2 years of my 2010 bankruptcy discharge, my score had recovered to a point where I could access credit again at reasonable terms. Your score is not your identity. It is a tool. Manage it deliberately. Rebuild it systematically. Step 5, never take on debt that threatens the floor again. This is the final step, and it's less about tactics and more about a principle to carry permanently. The debt that destroyed me in 2008 was not irresponsible at the time I took it on. It was strategic leverage that became catastrophic when conditions changed faster than I could respond. The lesson is not to avoid debt. The lesson is to never take on debt where the worst-case scenario threatens the floor. Before any future debt decision, ask one question. If everything goes wrong, if the income disappears, if the market moves, if the thing I'm betting on doesn't work, does this debt threaten my survival number? If yes, reduce the exposure until the worst-case scenario doesn't threaten the floor anymore. That's not timidity. That is the wisdom that 3 collapses and 15 years of rebuilding produces. Here's the truth about debt in a financial rebuild. It is not the enemy. Avoidance is the enemy. Shame is the enemy. The paralysis that comes from looking at a number that feels impossible and deciding not to look at it anymore, that is what destroys a comeback. The debt itself is a problem with a solution. So sort it, negotiate it, attack it systematically. Protect your score deliberately, and never again use debt in a way that puts your foundation at risk. That is the real debt strategy, built for men who've been through the fire and are not going back. If you want a step-by-step system, instead of trying to figure all this out on your own, I put together a free 30-day rebuild plan specifically for men in this situation. It's only 4 weeks. It doesn't cost a thing. You just download it, but it's one clear direction for you to follow in order to begin rebuilding your life. The link is in the description below. Now, next Thursday, we're going to go deep on one of the most destructive things a man does during a rebuild, measuring himself against who he used to be instead of who he's becoming. That one drops on Thursday, and if you don't want to miss it, hit the subscribe button right now. This channel posts every Monday and Thursday specifically for men who are rebuilding after losing everything. And if that's you, you belong here. And if you found it helpful, you know somebody else going through the same thing, please share it with another man, a friend, a family member, or someone you know that's in the same boat as we are. Let's rebuild together. That's wealth mode.